There we go. The robot voice said that it's happening, so now we can really kick off. Thank you, everyone, for being here for February session of the World I/O Forum. Today, we are doing I/O and consulting, and I'm very excited to be chatting with Dr. Dario, Yolanda Fraction, Dr. Greidick, and Dr. Whitaker. Thank you all for being here. And as we're going to open up really with a panel, but in order to do that, we need to know a little bit more about who you are. I've gotten to chat with you. It's been lovely, but the audience needs to know as well. So I'm going to randomly name Yolanda and put you on the spot. I'll then say the same to the other panelists before we then go into our conversation with each other about I/O and consulting. So, Yolanda, would you like to introduce yourself? What should people know about you?
Well, I'm passionate about developing human-centered, people-first workplaces. I can't say enough how important it is in this very disruptive environment that's filled with uncertainty and change that we center ourselves on people outcomes or business outcomes as well as the people. So I'm really excited about people science and performance as well. I'm an OD consultant or organization development consultant for those of you who aren't as familiar with OD, perhaps. OD consultant at Johns Hopkins University during the day. And on the side, I have a podcast called Teamwork Sandbox. And I'm working on just rolled out my book, Joyful Workplaces. So thanks so much for having me, D'Artagnan.
Awesome. Thank you, Yolanda. Dr. Greidick, would you like to introduce yourself next?
Sure. I'm Dr. Greidick. I'm an industrial and organizational psychologist. I am mostly interested in stress and burnout. I work with individuals. I've worked with groups. I also have a podcast, Workplace Psychology with Dr. Martha Greidick, and a YouTube channel, which is called Stress Free with Dr. G. And my book has been out for a couple of years now. It's the Stress Blueprint for Stress Management. So my focus is mainly on establishing ways of dealing with stress and preventing burnout as much as possible, whether that's on an individual basis or within groups or organizations. So that is where my passion is focused mostly.
Awesome. And thank you for sharing that, Dr. Greidick. And
Mhm.
Dr. Whitaker, would you like to take the floor?
Sure, thank you. I am Dr. Whitaker, IO psychologist. Uh, I've been consulting in IO psychology since actually working on my master's degree as a practitioner back then. But I've been doing it ever since then, since like 2015. But for organizations, I work on both the I and the O side when I do consulting for them. I also do the majority of organizations research. So a lot of times I do not get to do my own research. I'm doing research for organizations, but uh, on my behalf, my focus has always been on psychological safety, burnout, well-being within organizations. But thank you for having me.
And thank you for being here. And last and certainly not least, Dr. Pavlovic. Can you hear us?
Yeah, good afternoon. I can hear. Hello, everyone. I have studied at University of Phoenix for the first 6 years. I've completed bachelor's and the master's degree in industrial organizational psychology, and then I attended the doctoral program with the Capella University, and I graduated in May of 2023. I am interested in a workplace conflict and group dynamics. I wrote a dissertation on the subject of the leaders' experience of the workplace conflict and how the workplace conflict changes the perception of the leaders. And as soon as I completed my degree back in 2023, I registered my own consulting firm. I'm providing pro bono consulting services to anyone who needs any help related to the workplace conflict and group dynamics. And I just got certified like 3 weeks ago in a ProSci organizational change management. I'm going to probably expand my duties in that direction. I think combining group dynamics and a workplace conflict with the organizational change management, that could be a probably profitable and very interesting area to go to. So thank you for having me, and thanks.
Yeah, thank you for being here. And so I have a question, and Dr. Whitaker, I'm going to specifically ask you this one because so many, especially early career IOs, even students who say this is the degree I want, know they like the subject, but they don't even know all the doors that are open to them in the first place. So I remember when I did it, and I was surprised of the IO and consulting that there's a history in the first place, and still keep meeting more and more people who do it differently. So my question is, I want to know more about at what point did consulting become part of this picture? Could you briefly share how you moved from IO into consulting and what that really has looked like for you? And at this point, also, panelists, feel free to chime in and have conversation. I'll continue to ask questions to encourage more conversation, but at this point, we can interact back and forth and just have a good time.
Yes, I can address it for you. So, uh, like I said earlier, when I was working on my master's degree, I was looking for work in the field. And I happened to run across an internship, but it was an HR internship. I still applied, and of course, I did not get it because it was HR, but the president of the company invited me back. He created an IO internship for me. And
Mhm.
so while I was doing the internship, the vice president of the organization left. He moved basically 2 miles away to another, I mean, excuse me, 2 hours away to another organization. And he called me because of what I was doing for the organization I was still at, that he was previously at. And he asked me to come consult there for him and do some work there for them. And so I started doing that. And by word of mouth from him, he got me in touch with other organizations within that research triangle park. And that's how I started basically consulting for more and more organizations. And it was all because of him. I, I did I did not know how to get into consulting when I first started out, and I was working an internship. But
Mhm.
because of him and because of word of mouth and him helping me along the way, that's how I ended up in consulting.
Okay. I'm wondering how that might compare to some of our other panelists' experience in getting involved.
I'll jump in here if you don't mind. For me, it seems like as an IO psychologist, there is such a passion on the topic of the workplace and all things related to the workplace. So as an IO, I can't help but see things and think about what's right, what's wrong, what needs to be corrected, what could be better. And sometimes that comes out as free advice, which can then lead to something beyond just free advice. I've gotten connected with people by having conversations with friends about their workplaces who have then suggested that perhaps I could come in and provide assistance to the organization. And so, in that sense, it's organic, similar to Dr. Whitaker's journey. Sometimes it's word of mouth, sometimes, as is the case with me, I can't help but try to help. And you end up where you end up in that sense.
Mhm. And specifically, we've talked about largely, sounds like external consulting. And I'm wondering, because Yolanda, you've talked about the internal as well.
Yeah.
Is it the same story? I want to hear what aligns, what contradicts, what's your experience been?
It's been quite the mosaic of a career, I call it. Over the last 2 decades, I was thinking about this last night as I was kind of considering the questions for today. And I've been both internal and external. I've had my own business as an independent consultant and now consulting to deans and executives and senior leaders at Hopkins. It's been a varied experience. I think that for me, the ability to really have impact at scale at a deeper level on a day-to-day basis and build those relationships, come into people's office, listen to them, partner with them. It's felt a little deeper, and that it's nuance, right? That comes with its own advantages and disadvantages. But going back to behavior, I think what I heard from Dr. Martha, Dr. Stephen, is, thinking about individuals' behavior and burnout and exhaustion. So for me, what I do perhaps on a weekly basis is try to look at not just individual behavior and some of
Hmm.
the things that we're seeing at that level, but then trying to look at what's the team saying. Okay, the team is burned out. We have pockets of burned out. We have pockets of exhaustion. So what does this mean? Does this mean the system is under-resourced? Does this mean the system needs this or that? So I think for me, it's putting that IO and OD together to be able to then provide some OD interventions or work on some work that is a little bit more at the system level.
Okay. And this was mentioned before also, the IDO with versus OD. And do you want to translate a little bit more? Because not everyone in the
Yeah.
room is IO.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, I'm working on a doctorate now as we speak on organizational psychology. But I think for me, the biggest thing between IO and OD is actually the perspectives and the vantage points at which we work. And so I think with my OD work, I really have this hat of being able to do organization design, restructuring, things of that nature. And when I come in with the IO hat, I'm really thinking about behavior, team dynamics, team effectiveness. I've been doing a lot of assessment work and really talking with teams about how behaviors might show up in the workplace. So putting those little two together, it's very interesting common background that I have compared to what it may look like typically.
Okay. Awesome. And so as we're talking about consulting and IO and these concepts, would anyone be able to describe more like what that looks like on a day to day, especially from a student or early career perspective? There's so many assumptions of consultant puts on t-shirt or puts on a button-up shirt, goes into office, mysterious things happen, and then they leave the office 12 hours later that day. Can you demystify a little bit of what this looks like for you specifically? And is this for any of our panelists?
I think that it will vary on an individual basis. You can have a general idea, but it will vary on an individual basis because we as individuals have ways of approaching things, but we also have to take into consideration the organizations and the individuals that we work with. Not
Hmm.
every organization wants the same kind of involvement. Some people bring you on board with open arms and are very open-minded to your suggestions, your ideas, your observations. Others have things in place that they want you to work within certain parameters. So that will vary. So as much as we want to go in and we have ideas, what will help, what can help, what has helped in the past with other organizations, we have to be able to listen to the client and then provide the kind of response to them in the form of consulting and guidance that they actually need. So it's not
Hmm.
so much about coming in with a prepared solution that might ideally fit everybody's needs. It's about working with specific clients, with individual clients, to match their needs and come up together with what works for them. Just as we can't assume that whatever we've done in the past will work there, we also can't assume that they're interested in the
Hmm.
same type of solution. If you've ever been in a company on a receiving end where management brings in a third party, an outside party, a consultant, sometimes there's some resistance. Sometimes um, you can detect from people a resistance that, look, you're new here, you don't know what happens on a daily basis, you don't know any of us, but you're going to provide us with answers. So you have to understand that first and foremost, especially as psychologists, we listen and we observe, And then we work with the organization to create the kind of solution that will work for them. You don't want to leave them with tools that they will never use, but rather you want to make sure that they have the kind of tools that will make a difference for them. So it will vary from individual consultant from one to another and then amongst the clients that you work with.
Okay. And I also appreciate how much you're focused on the client with that answer rather than saying, wake up at 7, have a meeting, force them to use this tool, and if they don't like it, that's on them. It's okay, it makes sense. You're good at what you do, and that's because you actually consider the client in the first place.
You have to.
Yeah. So I'm curious then, earlier when you started, what would be something, either a mistake you've made or possibly that you've seen others make much earlier career? You can already tell it might be something to do with clients, but what might be something you'd say, okay, I used to do it this way. Here's the big turn I'd recommend you don't do it in your life.
Well, for me personally, I can tell you, as someone who is eager and excited to help, especially when you
Hmm.
just first start, you don't understand why they just don't want to do it your way. You have the answer. Why are they resisting? You have to let that go. Some people will
Hmm.
resist you. So even if you have the best answer, the best solution, it may or may not be what they're willing to take on and implement. And actually, be happy with the end results and by extension be happy with you, not based on what you provided as much as based on what they did with it. So I
Okay.
think the first there's this expectation that yes, I'm here to help. I have the solution. I've heard you. I put together what I know will work. But why are you resisting? You have to be able to know that sometimes that's going to be a reality and you have to let it go. It's not you. You're working with others. It's a collective thing.
Right. Okay. And so, Dr. Whitaker, one of the things that stands out most when in your profile and in what you show professionally is the ethics and there's a sense of doing things the right way in the first place. And so as I'm hearing from Dr. Geidick about that you really need to understand the client where they're coming from, I can't help but question at what times have you run into situations where there is a right way? It's objective. Of course, you're the expert, you're the consultant, you know these things, but it's not just about a preference. It might involve something more that feels deeper. Has that ever been a conflict that you've experienced or might have just general advice about?
Well, I learned from working with clients that, well, I used to make the mistake of only developing the solution that they want. But
Okay.
as time went on, I determined that I'll make the solution that they want, the initiatives that they want, but I'll also do what I need to do, what's more feasible, what's more ethical. And so I give them a choice at the point in time, and I tell them this is why this will work, and this is why this will not work. And a lot of times it's their way will not work, and the ethical boundaries that they're crossing, and the problems that they'll have down the road. And
Hmm.
I've gotten pushback, and sometimes my solution has gone on, and then sometimes I've parted ways with organizations because a lot of times some organizations will not just see what is right, see the proper way to do something, even though they have an IELTS psychologist telling them so. They will not see that. They want it their way. And when they want it their way, and you know yourself, it's not ethical, it's not feasible, it's just time to walk away.
Okay. And thank you for that. Sounds like useful advice as well. And Dr. Dario, what's going through your head as you're hearing about these different conundrums and situations that are being shared? Specifically regarding to working with clients, especially when you and the client see something different and it's not just surface level, what color should the wall be? And suppose, Yolanda, I might ask you the same thing as well then, especially again with the internal role, I wonder what that looks like, especially when it's not a potential client here and there, it's the client for you.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely think that, going back to what was said earlier by Dr. Martha, it's consulting is an humbling experience. And, when we think about consulting, a lot of people automatically think about advising, right? So I used to be a management consultant. Management consultants are sometimes known for coming in with these big, 60 point slide decks, and lofty, details. And here's what we're going to roll out. We're going to push out this big plan, right? And what I have found as I've matured in consulting is that it's really about influence. It's really about understanding what are the levers that I can use to be able to create impact, to make change, to really put on a compassionate and careful lens to
Mhm.
the work that I'm doing. So I think as an IO, the great thing is understanding the behavioral dynamics piece. And some people may come from it with more of a traditional business mindset, right? So I think there's a very big difference between an MBA and an IO degree. And so it's Elise nodding. So I think it's all about our lens and our perspective and how we approach the work. So I'd like to think that I am approaching it with truly coming in, doing a deep dive, having a lot of patience and care with going through and moving through my engagements.
Okay. What a people-focused answer also. So you're doing IO service. Well, so for early career IOs, and we have a number of them here, who are interested in IO and consulting in the first place, uh, are there any suggestions on what they should be doing to prepare? Right now, it sounds like they should be working on like people skills and how to say no in polite ways from what I'm hearing, but I want to hear a little bit more about what are any of these people, what should they be doing in order to open up some of these doors and have it be an option for them in the future? Open question to any panelists. This is just a conversation. I don't need to be calling on names too often.
I think what Dr. Whitaker was saying earlier, if you get involved in how he did it, get involved
Mhm.
with internships, that opens opportunities for you. And Dr. Whitaker, maybe you can speak more on that particular way of entering into that part of the field. But that seems like a good way to get started.
Yes, I agree. It's one of the best ways to get started because you cannot just go into consulting without any experience in the field. So you have to gain that experience first. If I mean, even if you get hired by a company and it's not an internship, but you actually get hired by a company, you can use that experience to set yourself up for your own consulting practice outside of that organization. If you just want to go do consulting and that be it, so that's fine. But you have to gain that experience first. And if you cannot find a paid role within the field, then you look for an internship. And you also you when you're in graduate school, you need to build relationships with your professors, especially the ones that know and have done the work outside of academia, because they can provide a lot of guidance for you as well as other IOs that are on LinkedIn. You can reach out to them, ask them how they started, what steps you should take to get to a place where you actually want to be in your career.
Dr.
Spoken like a
Whitaker,
professor. Go
you
ahead,
and I
please,
are
Dr.
of the
Rydick.
same mind because I was also thinking getting engaged in opportunities through one's school, the university, the IO program, with professors, as Dr. Whitaker said, but also consider whether or not your school has connections that you can benefit from and utilize. So you have to be proactive, right? These jobs will not land in your lap. But yes, Dr. Whitaker brings up good points.
Yeah. Well, so I'm wondering, what's a skill that really, when you're in the role, not just looking for the role, that you'd say is critical, that you use all the time, that no one would expect out unless they actually had done it for themselves?
So I was just thinking of a book that I was rereading, Humble Consulting by Edward Schein. And I would say, the biggest thing is the use of self. The OD network has a foundational, like a framework or model. And I would say that I would encourage people to revisit that book, Humble Consulting, if you haven't heard of that. But the biggest thing I think I found as someone who's a doctoral student in IO is that there's so many different paths. Okay. And so there's different work and there's different functional areas, right? So there's one that I had specialized in early career is learning and development. A number of IOs are in learning and development. Another piece is OD or organization development.
Hmm.
So I would say take a look. You can look at whether it's PSYOP or Society for Organizational Industrial Psychology, OD, or whatever the networks are, but really get to know the functional area you think you might be interested in, even before going into graduate school or whatever the postdoc work or postgraduate work you want to do. I think that was really important because I've had a very non-traditional career. This is probably my third career in my 40s, right? So I started off as a classroom teacher. My BA is in education. From
Hmm.
there, I literally was in my classroom as an instructional coach, and someone said to me, a principal said, "Hey, I think you need to be doing this district-wide training." And I was like, "Doing it? Okay, great, great, I'll go." She said, "No, I need you to train 100 people this weekend."
Ah,
And
that's
I
very
fell
different.
into training. I didn't go to school for it. So I was just going to say, just consider that there are different routes to get to the same thing. And if your path looks non-traditional, it takes you a little while to get there. Again, I'm in my 40s working on a doctorate here. And so if it takes you a little while to get there, kind of stick with it, be willing to play around with things. I finally got the opportunity to go back for my doctorate, but it took a little while, and that's okay. So I was been in consulting for 20 years, but now I have the language to add on top of what I already had.
Yeah. A lot of what I'm hearing, it's I'd say how it surprises me versus when I even was getting my graduate degree was that the idea of consulting was almost like you got either MBA or you got to study consulting. As much as there are classes that allow that or offer that type of thing, but the so much seems to really put emphasis on knowing your other strengths, or whether you mentioned the example of L&D or having something to offer rather than I am consultant, I do consult, can I do consult for you now? But being more of a well-rounded human being, well-rounded professional, it seems like there's so much more to being a good consultant other than having that title, just from listening to everything that all three of you are sharing so far. Would you say I'm barking up the right tree here?
Yes. And also to add uh, further with that, you also have to be not only a researcher but an investigator.
Hmm.
Some clients you work with will share almost everything with you, and you have to be able to investigate to understand what is really going wrong, what is going right. And you might also have an opportunity to do some investigations for organizations. I'm not the only IO psychologist has done this. I've done sexual harassment investigations, racial discrimination investigations. I've also known other psychologists to do this as well as to testify in court. So you have to come at consulting with knowing how to be a researcher and as well as an investigator.
Hmm. Okay. Which that that's not one of the skill sets I would have anticipated before when thinking, okay, consultant. The average person might think it means know business and be good at math, and that's so much more involved.
But the other part to that is also being able to know your own limitations. Because if you get yourself into something that is beyond your scope of abilities or your level of comfort, you may find yourself somewhere where you did not want to be. So, as Dr.
Mhm.
Whitaker mentioned, you may be in a position where you have to do some investigating, some digging around, and it may be a topic that's uncomfortable for you, that you're not familiar with, that has a trigger component to you. You may not want to ever have to testify in court. You have to know that. So just because you put on your hat of a consultant, know what your limitations are as a human being and as a professional, and be willing and able to say no to certain assignments, to certain parts of a job. You may have to pass on something. You may have to refer a client to a colleague. Someone you know will do a better job. So being honest with yourself and by extension with your client will be better for both of you. So you have to be able to do that. Know your limits.
You can see that. And also it's wonderful advice to early career people as well, because when you're looking for clients in the first place, that's so much more challenging. But at the same time, that's a lesson that you need to know at the beginning. And I can imagine if you didn't, could really be an obstacle to continuing your career after that.
And that's a fine line because, especially as you're starting out, you want to go in with a certain level of confidence, right? If you're not confident in yourself, how can your client be confident in you and the results you produce? So you have to have a certain level of confidence. But confidence, true confidence, comes with knowing your limits. Don't shy
Mhm.
away from doing the work you're comfortable doing and you know you can do. But don't cross lines just because I either get this particular client or I have to look for someone else.
Right. Makes total
And
sense.
and like Dr. Braddock was saying, if you do not know your limits, then you set yourself up for failure. And that's something you really do not want to do, especially early career.
Which begs the question, once again, early career question, for those that are saying, this is what I want to do, at least I think this is what I want to do. Well, I'm really confident that this is what I want to do, but I don't have experience to inform that confidence. What's what would you recommend to them?
Do some free work.
Mm.
Very few people will turn you down for free consulting. But you know what? You will have gained experience, and sometimes it'll be incredibly important, valuable experience. Other times it'll just be run-of-the-mill experience, but it's experience nonetheless. Free, people like free stuff. So if you find yourself in that place where nothing else is happening because you can't say, hey, I've done X, Y, and Z, do some free work. People like free
Okay.
work. Reach out to nonprofits. They don't have any money, right? So those will be the people who want the free stuff. Reach out to nonprofits. Help them out. That goes on your resume. That's, paying the dues.
Yeah.
The other piece that I was going to add that looking back in early career that was really helpful is going back to this piece of pro-social work or volunteering pro bono work is just serving, being on committees, being on boards, just signing up. And then if you have a role right now, today's modern world, people are always trying to do more with less, right? That's just across different organizations. So you
Hmm.
might consider a stretch opportunity. And I really give a lot of thanks to my managers who said, hey, could you be on that cross-functional working group? Could you be on that committee? Could you represent us here? Could you do this thing? So I would just try to say find your sponsors, your mentors, and your advocates, because
Hmm.
those are the people, particularly sponsors, especially not just a mentor, because there's a difference between a mentor and a sponsor there.
Tell
But
us right
find the
now,
people.
please.
I had a lot of mentors in my life. A mentor provides advice. They provide guidance. They may not be the ones to help open the door for you and say, hey, I'm going to speak that name in the room that you're not in and
Hmm.
actually say, have you considered this person for a promotion? Have you considered this person for a senior level role or for a job? And as a first generation college student, I found out I had a lot of mentors, but not as many sponsors. So I
Okay.
had the resume, but I had not always the invitations to be able to go and interview or get the job. So just really make yourself valuable. I think that's the biggest key. Don't ask for something necessarily for someone. Put out the value. How can I help you first versus trying to get something?
Okay. It sounds like at the same time there's a lot of comfort with ambiguity needed here in the first place because you can go on LinkedIn and find, well, not actually 1,000 different internships. You can find the word intern on LinkedIn, but when it comes to like the pro bono word that you're talking about, Dr. Gajek, or even being open for different cross-functional work like you've described, it sounds like you can have whatever plan you want, but all of this practical advice really puts emphasis on you've got to bend, you've got to come up with creative things. It's not about finding an opportunity that's officially been posted on a job board. It's about either finding the ones that haven't made their way yet, or in some cases, creating your own and being the one to pursue it in the first place. Am I hearing you
Absolutely.
correctly?
Absolutely. I mean, there are people you know in your own community, whether it's your physical community, where you live, where you work, in surrounding towns, maybe in organizations you are a part of, online communities. So put yourself out there as being available to bring certain services, certain amount of value to people. Sometimes you have to create your own opportunities. When you see, for example, that something could use a little help, an organization where you interact with them regularly, maybe you're a customer or some other kind of relationship, you can pitch the idea of helping them out without charging them and get your foot in the door with that organization and get the ball rolling on gaining experience. And I wanted to make a point, something Lee brought up in our chat that's really,
Hmm.
really important is even if you're doing pro bono work, and thank you, Lee, for that, make sure you're doing the kind of job you would be doing if they were paying you $1 million. That means you do your best, you're as professional as possible, you have a contract in place, everybody's on the same page, everybody understands what's expected, what you will deliver, because just because it's free doesn't mean you shouldn't be as professional as you would be if you were getting paid good money for it. So thank you, Lee. That was an excellent point to remind everybody, especially as they're getting started.
And at this point, also, I've been asking you so many questions, but I've been a bit selfish. I want everyone to get to ask you questions as well. Please, you're welcome to go ahead and put them in the chat if you want me to read them and you don't want to speak. That said, you're also welcome to just unmute and ask more questions because Lee and me, as I see y'all interacting in the chat, I want to make sure that you actually get to be a part of this because I promised you'd get at least a few minutes to participate more than me.
I'll ask a question. I've really loved this idea of ways that you can gain experience when you don't yet have it, but would be really interested in hearing some specific examples, maybe from your early careers, of a way that you actually went about that. I think that that sort of how to
Hmm.
is also really helpful.
Well, for me, I can tell you a couple of different things. I've gone back to my old high school and actually reconnected with some people there and offered them some free advice as a way of giving back. But it's also a place that I cared about, that I spent years, right? Spent 4 years with them. So I wanted to give back, but that gave me an opportunity to actually gain momentum and gain some experience while doing something for them. So that was one of mine, and it was one of my favorites. But I don't know if anybody else wanted to share that.
All right, I'll jump in. So when I was working at a financial services company, it was an asset management company here based in Baltimore. I initially came in as a learning and development specialist, and this was out of teaching. So it was a big what do you steep learning curve to say the least. And I was able to assess the gap on my own by doing research and talking to people within the company. I would say, look, have coffee, have lunch. I know as a consultant, I know this is probably very generic, but have the coffees, have the lunches. Today I'm very, very relational. Even today, I was like at a site. I'm always learning, trying to understand. So assessing the gap was helpful for me early on because I realized, oh, I was missing a talent management competency and I was missing some business acumen because I was going into financial services. So I would say diagnose, just like we had helped clients to diagnose situations or diagnose issues or challenges, diagnose yourself, right? Life design is a big one. I'm a big, proponent of life design. You can Google it, life design, and really be intentional about saying, okay, I'm a learning and development specialist today. I have a graduate degree in adult and organizational learning. That's my hat. Where's the future? What do I need? What are the skills pathing, right? Our own job pathing, career pathing. What do I need? Be very intentional about that early on.
I love that, and that you're applying the same skill set to yourself in the same way. How creative. And it takes honestly a creative lens, both in businesses and with yourself, to look at something and not say you're stuck where you are. The entire art of the type of consulting we've been discussing, at least, is about figuring out what helpful change would actually look like and helping people get there in the first place. I love that. But I'm not going to ask another question. I'm going to pause and wait and make sure other people get theirs in. And Jesse in the chat says, you've touched on this during the discussion, but any advice on bringing in new clients specifically, particularly in industries you've not worked with? That's a fun one, Jesse. Thank you. Jesse's coming in from Sterling today. I'll leave that one open for our panelists.
I guess my question would be, I'm curious, why do you want to explore an industry you haven't explored before, especially if you're just starting in consulting? To me, that would be something that a more experienced consultant might do to kind of stretch their abilities a little bit. But if somebody wants to explore an industry where they haven't had any experience, I would start by learning as much about that industry as possible. Not only what do they do, what actually goes on, but also things like reputation, what tends to go right, what tends to go wrong. Because if you walk into an industry that you know nothing about, realistically, what confidence are you offering to your potential client that you have the answers? You can't just claim, well, I'm a fresh pair of eyes on what you guys are doing here. You really need to have some background knowledge. So at the very least, do a deep dive into the industry and understand as much as you can understand about it without having been in the middle of it.
Jesse, do you have any response?
That's really helpful. Yeah, sorry, my microphone's not very good, but I'll try and talk. Um, yeah, I suppose so. I've been a consultant business psychologist for about 4 years, so I'm not new, but not experienced enough, I suppose. And yeah, I'm really interested in maybe bringing in some new clients from like the technology industry or 'cause I'm part of a consultancy, but we've kind of niched ourselves a little bit, um, to be perfectly honest. So just kind of breaching new industries and getting into them and being in the room with the right people is something that yeah, just looking for advice about really. But yeah, definitely knowing about the industry is really, yeah, I can see why that's key.
Because that will also give you a certain level of confidence, right? You understand what they do, you know how they speak, you know what they mean, but also know what are their pain points. What kind of things should you become an expert in for their benefit? in 4 years, you got some experience under your belt, so you can go in confidently as long as you do your background homework on that new industry. I think you would be just fine doing that.
D'Artagnan, the other thing I wanted to say to Jesse is, the biggest thing with consulting, and remember when I was an independent consultant and it was just like trying to, what do they call it? You eat what you kill type of thing. But one thing that helped is that going in with someone else and not going at it alone. So I
Hmm.
would say if you know someone who you look up to or admire, someone who has their own practice, for example, might need a pair of hands, going back to what was said earlier, a pair of hands. We say this a lot in consulting. You don't want to just be a pair of hands though, like was mentioned, or be a fresh eyes, right? You want to offer maybe that thing you do really well. And I think this is something even now in my mature career that I'm working on is what is that, minimum viable product for yourself? Like what makes you an MVP, right? Jesse, like what is that one thing you do really well so that you can partner with someone who already has a contract? We call it subcontracting, right? You could come in and be a support to them and have something to offer, right? Even if it's just, hey, I do this writing really well. I can write this thing really well for you, or do this PowerPoint design really well. Come in as a support and as a tool.
Also, just not you want to research, not only just research the industry, but select certain organizations within that industry that you would like to work for and do research on them as well. You want to know as much as possible about them as you can, and you could actually approach them and find a method to approach them and offer your services to them. Explain to which is why you need an elevator speech, but you approach them and inform them that you know what they do and what you have to offer that could go along with what they do.
I wanted to share an example that I heard many years ago from a person who did IT consulting. And while I don't recommend exactly what they did, their method was effective. I would suggest maybe altering their approach. So this person went around different buildings in a business area and hacked into their networks and then presented each company with how easy it was to hack into their networks, and he would be able to, for a fee, secure their networks. While I don't suggest that you do that, don't do anything like that. But if you research the company, like Dr. Whitaker said, you might be able to come across some pain points, some shortcomings where you might show up as if magically with a solution for them. So being creative.
And then how do you, sorry, I'm asking a follow-up question without permission. How
No,
do
you
you
go
then,
ahead, Jesse. You're good. Everyone's enjoying this.
thank you. I suppose my question then sort of following on from that is, so you've obviously you've got your USP, you've done your research, you found a problem. How do you then address that in a way with them that's not kind of insulting to that organization?
Well, don't insult them. It's go in as the professional that you are. What you could do is, and anybody could really do this, if you are pitching your services as a consultant, maybe you have a brochure or some kind of informational material. What you could do is get creative and include on that material, that brochure, the thing that they need help with as one of the things you specialize in. So you don't have to say, you know what you're really bad at and I can fix for you. You can say, look, these are the things I'm really good at helping other organizations with. Just see if any of this applies to you, right? So it's a nice way of sneaking that in there.
I love the people skills that IO brings to consulting. It's incredible. And I'm going to pause our conversation for a moment. We have 5 minutes left, and I'd like to hand everyone over for a moment to Nikita. Now, he's in charge of Psychology at Work, the organization that originally started this event in the first place. And at the end of every session, we like to talk about any other additional opportunities or even events that might exist for people who are involved in the industry. So, Nikita, take it away. I will be also, right after this, leading a workshop for another group called the Psychology Business Incubator. So it may be that Nikita is the one saying goodbye at the end rather than me. In that case, just one big round of applause for our panelists. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. It's been so nice getting to have these conversations and learning more about your experiences with both IO and consulting.
Thank you. Thanks.
And thank you, D'Artagnan, for organizing and hosting this. And talking about organizing, the next event is already in the diary, and you can already sign up to it, as D'Artagnan popped in the comments. Another key thing, if you go, oh my God, a month is too far to wait. Well, Lee got you covered because there's a networking event literally 4 hours from now, which Lee runs. So Lee, can you tell us about your event?
Sure. It's nothing near as organized as this, because D'Artagnan's done a great job with this. But it is just as Nikita likes to say, it's a brilliant event where people come together just to be amongst those that are interested in the things we are interested in. So it's just a place for networking, conversation, and whatnot. Talk about things that interest those in our community. No real requirements other than just to show up, bring your authentic self, bring your questions, bring your knowledge to share with others, and that's it. And the link is in the chat. We do this weekly, and those weeks I can't be there, somebody else does it, and we're there pretty much every week.
Mm-hmm. Teamwork. So perfect. So thank you so much, everybody. And thank you, D'Artagnan. D'Artagnan, wishing you a wonderful next meeting. And you can pop over to Lee's as well. And yeah, hopefully see you at the next one. And thank you to our wonderful panelists and all your wonderful participation. And hopefully you're all linked in. So that's sorted. So wishing you a wonderful rest of the day, Friday, and the weekend when it comes. So all the best, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you, Ron.